If Woody had gone right to the police, this would never have happened.
Uh-oh.
So there are liberties being taken, like there's going to be an increased amount of shit talk.
Oh, I have to remind myself I'm here willingly.
Catch one with a little bit of attitude, big guy.
Man, you champion son.
It's a kangaroo court.
What do you mean? How is the NFL a kangaroo court?
Could you please let me explain why?
No, I don't want to hear this garbage. Give me an answer to the questions I asked you.
What the fuck are we doing?
Come on with it, baby!
Thanks, boy.
Italian. I'll talk to you later.
Let's get to the scene,
All right.
right?
My undercarriage is sweating. For the best Italian food in Western New York, Elliot Apollo's, call 716-825-3675. The Lardon Construction Group.
Fubo TV, the official streaming service of Do Champions. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Do Champions.
For all your summertime needs, beauty pools, as well as kayak pools.
CX Chronicles, your total customer solutions focused manager. W.GG, the official energy drink of Do Champions.
Hey, Sons of Erie, our artwork looks better on your walls. Hamburg Brewing, please visit our tap room on Boston State Road, Hamburg, New York. And finally,
Fat Boy Surf Club for all your surfing needs.
hey, what's going on? It is one of your hosts here, Student Body Right. And I would like to welcome you to the Third and Manageable podcast. And as always, my man who joins me, sitting across from me, back in the midi studio.
Yeah.
Mr. Matt Diegert. Yo, what up, dude? All right.
Not too bad. Super excited for the show tonight. I mean, we got a great guest on, as people on Twitter and everybody everywhere else can see.
Yeah, right.
I mean, this guy is one of the great follows on Twitter too.
I said it last week. It's increasingly alarming when we get serious guests, and I am such an unserious person. But no, it's to be serious. This guy has a proprietary system and a three-letter acronym RAS, Relative Athletic Score. We're gonna walk him through it. What makes it his baby? How he turned that baby into a toddler, into a fully fledged walking, talking adult. Matt, we've been with this guy. I feel like we've been seeing this guy since my first iterations on Twitter, starting my Twitter account, because it was right around, draft days, and me being kind of a math guy, and, working trading in my normal job. Like I was always like just interested in like weighted averages, like stochastic volatility, Black Scholes, and it was kind of cool that there were like applications of like my past life.
Right.
And I remember like diving in and like seeing what my RAS score when I was like cut from my bullshit.
Shout out Alex Brasky 464.
Jesus, jeez Louise. Yeah. Shout out Alex Brasky. Eric.
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Too early to do that.
Too early.
So anyway, we're gonna bring him out in I don't know, 2 minutes, whatever. I'm really excited for this one. We have a whole call sheet of what makes this palatable, what makes this worth listening to, the various applications, and kind of what should make you smarter for the draft.
As a football fan, as a draft fan, as anything else. My pleasure to introduce Kent Lee Platte. How are we doing?
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Super excited to have you on tonight. Now, do you go by just Kent Lee? Kent? Like, how do we address
Kent's
you?
fine. Yeah, Kent's fine.
Asshole. No.
I started using my middle name because you guys actually mispronounced my last name, but that's common.
How do you pronounce it?
It's pronounced Platte, and I started using
Platte.
Lee, so they'd be like Kent Lee Platte, and
it
actually backfired. People that were pronouncing my
Should
name
have a children's show.
started pronouncing it wrong after I did that, so I kind of shot myself in the foot with it.
Gotcha.
Well, go back now.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to try and bring our audience a great show tonight, to get them primed up for the draft that's in about 12 days.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Especially our fans on our side, being Bills fans. One of the I think one of the smarter fan bases all the way around as far as draft goes, as far as players go, things like that. Just because we're so in tune and there's nothing else to do in Buffalo, other than the Bills and the Sabres. So. I'll let Student kind of start off here real quick.
Yeah, well, one of the first things that's not even on the sheet is as we enter this time, as we said, 12 days out, man. What's this time like for you? I mean, I'd assume the work's already done. Is it now that like you have to kind of unsheath your battle axe and defend what you've already led up to do because all eyes right now are on it? Or where do you find yourself right now, kind of in the Twitter web on the Bird app, taking up most of your time, or kind of grooming and fine tuning this baby?
Yeah, so I've already posted all of the cards, or at least scheduled them, and we're going to run wide receivers through tomorrow. So all of the players that are above 5 or notable on our rankings have already been posted on Twitter. They're all up on the site. We actually have more players in this draft class than any draft year ever by, I think, 400 and almost 500 players.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah, it's a big one. So a lot of that work is done. I have a few schools left to do. TCU is the big one that I still have to do. But most of them are already tested at the Big 12 Pro Day anyway, so there's not a lot left for me to do on the data entry and running code front. But it's just looking up numbers and trying to find ways to explain how the data is useful to people. So when their team comes up on draft day and they pick a guy that has a really good score, I can explain why they should be excited by that. And if they have a player that didn't score very, very well, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world either. This is meant to be a tool to help people kind of stomach the draft and take in all of this data that we have in a way that anybody can understand.
It makes it almost palatable, right?
Yeah, that's always been the goal, man. Make it as easy to understand as I can.
Where do you find more catharsis? Explaining RAS is your baby, defending it, or kind of watching it grow?
Watching it grow has been a lot of fun. I used to say whenever people would ask you, and it's even still up on my site actually, is do NFL teams use RAS for anything? And I've always said, yeah, kind of no. Nobody's ever said to me that this is a thing that teams actually use, but I know teams have their own dedicated analytics departments. We know from the way that they draft that they use something similar. This is at least an analog to what they're using. But this year, I can't even say that anymore. I have been contacted by teams who use my data.
That's got to feel great, man.
It's awesome. The media sites.
No, truly, it's got to be like, wow, this is where we're at.
Right.
I mean, congrats, man. That's nothing to be swept under. Like, you're making waves, and now people are trying to paddle out and ride your wave. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it's exciting, man, and I love going on team sites. I love seeing my work on all the sites and stuff. It's fun to see all this stuff. I think people are really starting to understand the draft better and understand why we go through this process, why we look at all these guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as this is your proprietary system, we kind of have ours not as weighted based or anything like that, but we call it BAWA, which is the best available when available, pulling up on the screen right here. The best available when available. We have it against a couple characters. Do you have it anywhere up there?
It's somewhere in here. Yep, there you go.
Yeah, the best available when available, and this is a system Matt and I have just trying to explain where we're at in the draft, is best available when available versus need. We know the Buffalo Bills need a corner. With the departure of Kyer, with Rasul Douglas not signing, we know we need a corner versus development. Sometimes selecting those FCS players like a Spencer Brown, who had an amazing RAS score, selecting Christian Benford. That's best available when available versus how we can develop them. Best available when available, versus depth. Obviously, we don't really need to move up to take a quarterback with the JA-17 at the helm. And then best available when available versus, the weighted utility. And we always bring up, the punter scenario. Just because the guy can punt the ball 3 country miles doesn't mean you move up to the second round to take him. So that's kind of like our proprietary kind of thing we have over here. Now, that's just a lot of hot air when it comes to, we don't have to crunch the numbers. But I'm assuming that's you're hearing it for the first time. Do you see any like synergistic applications with RAS there and how we can improve like our own thing? Because that's kind of something me and Matt have been tossing around now for like 2 seasons now, and we're always looking to improve it.
Well, you're talking about best available, and what RAS allows you to do is compare traits that from historical data, right? Mm-hmm. I had a post about it the other day about how people like to use anecdotal evidence. They say, I found this one guy that was successful but scored really poorly. Obviously, none of this means anything. But you always got to zoom out. You got to look at the bigger picture and what it means like from a volume perspective. And when you're looking at best available, we've only ever had one running back with a below average score in the first round in the entire length of the database, almost 40 years. It's actually Mark Ingram.
Really?
Had a
the big boy out of Alabama.
Yep. And we could go into all kinds of discussions about whether the value and all that stuff match, but he's the only one in almost 40 years of data who was drafted in the first round. So if we had a running back that had that kind of college tape but tested poorly, you look at best available, does that really fall in line? because you have to look at it's only ever happened once. And yes, he was successful, but it took quite a while for his career to really progress. It's hard to make any kind of statistical projection from one guy. But the fact that it hasn't happened, we don't have another case to try to build a trend from. You got to take that into consideration. Be like, what does that data mean to me? You go back to his tape. If his tape is good enough, or maybe they don't line up with what the testing is, maybe he had an injury or something that could go on. There's explanations you can look into. But it allows you to take a look at that bigger picture and take additional information into it.
Go ahead, Matty.
Yeah, no, I mean, is there?
That's interesting.
Yeah, no, it's
the marketing inventory took me by surprise.
Yeah, that kind of, it stuck me between the ears a little bit.
Yeah, I was like, oh man.
But no, I mean, is there more of a broad-based rubric that you use when it comes down to RAS, or is like when you're evaluating guys, or is it more of like, average discourse? More
discourse. I don't really, because I know how probabilities work, and that's always been the way that I look at this stuff from a projection standpoint. I'm not looking at whether or not a guy will be successful, because most players won't be. I mentioned this is the largest draft class that we've had in the entire time of studying this data. It's almost 3,000 players. It's like 2,700 something right now. I'll probably get another 100 before this is over. But there's only 250 draft picks, and most of those draft picks aren't going to be successful. So the failure rate coming from prospect to NFL is just massive.
Sure, I mean, the overall average. I mean, I think the overall average of an NFL career is much less than 3.5 years.
2.3 or 2.6, something like that. Yeah,
if you make it at all, and you try to find what gives me the best odds for success, right? What is the likelihood of this happening, and isolating for any other factors. You can take all those other factors into account and build something off of that. But I like to isolate the factors individually so that you can use them and say, this is what this means by itself. Without looking at anything else, this is what this means. And it gives you a good idea of what you can look at without having to take into consideration all the other traits. Just what's the likelihood of this working out? And when you have it, I think the running back one that I did was 50% of the 1,000-yard running backs were over 8 for RAS. And then the bottom 15%, or there was only 15% that rushed for 1,000 yards that were in that bottom 50%, the 5 and below for RAS. Does that mean that a guy with a low score is going to be terrible? No. Does it mean a guy with a great score is going to be awesome? Also no. But if you have two guys with similar tape, that could be a tiebreaker between them. If you're trying to project how they're going to be used in the NFL, you can break down the individual traits. So it just gets into how granular you want to get with the data.
Well, and speaking of data and all the inputs, how do you deal with a data set being omitted? Say like agility drills. Guy doesn't do a 3-cone. The guy doesn't do a shuttle. How does if you just maybe just like a micro view of it? How do you deal with a data set, the lack of a data set in the RAS score? Like you typically always have a 40. You typically always have a bench press. Typically always have a broad and stuff like that. How do you deal with somebody who chooses to not run some of those agility?
Right, because I mean, it seems less and less they're running 3-cone drills and shuttles.
It's almost like they predicate their agility on, you want to check tape? Like,
some of that is too. And
I mean, maybe it's the DK Metcalf effect. The guy did a 3-cone.
Yeah.
It was like a Boeing 707.
I think that's a great conversation to have, because I think that with people not doing it, a lot of that has to do with them not doing it at the combine. Most of those guys will go back and do it at their pro days. They still complete the drills. And that's partially because there's guys that don't want to do it. There's some guys that don't have time to prepare for it. But also, it's just poorly scheduled. The combine has been poorly scheduled for a few years now. They've changed things around a couple times, trying to find that good balance. I think they've improved a couple of things, but they've always got a couple of drills that end up being kind of out in the cold. And lately, it's been the agility drills and the bench press, because of how they separate those drills out and when they actually do them. And because there's no video on them, because there's no accolades for guys that run these drills, it takes them hours to release them. They're super late at night. What motivation do they have to try to do this? It's not going to really help them in any way. And if a team wants their cone or agility drill, they'll just have them run it, because teams have guys do stuff at their pro days or their individual workouts all the time. So part of it is that. And for RAS, I don't really do anything with it, because RAS is not a a 10 score period thing. If you miss the bench, you lose this much. If you miss the cone, you lose this much. You just have to have 6 metrics to qualify. It's a qualified metric.
Okay. I gotta write that down. I didn't know.
Yeah, so you do end up with guys who don't do their agility testing, and it keeps their score a little bit higher than maybe if they had. But my argument has always been, we don't know. We can make assumptions about how guys are going to test, but players blow out our expectations every single year, for good and for bad. We have guys that come out that you expect to just blow it away. Dalvin Cook's another running back example. I've been doing running backs work over the last couple of days. That's why I got a whole bunch of examples queued up in my head. But like Dalvin Cook was expected to be this like wonderkin kind of athlete when he went to the combine, and he kind of crapped the bed when it came to his testing. He had a good 40-yard dash, and everything else that he did was poor. He ended up with a below-average score overall. I think his vert was like 25 inches. Something. Don't quote me on that.
His advice to his brother's pretty poor too.
Stop it! Not doing this here.
So we don't get those expectations. We might think a thing is true, and we might think a guy skips it because he thinks he's going to do poorly, but that's usually not the case. A lot of times they just don't want to do it. This year we had guys skipping drills because of Ramadan, because of how things were scheduled with their pro day and when the religious events were. Guys will skip events because of an injury. They'll skip an event because of an injury that they have already recovered from because they didn't have time to train for it. Sometimes players are coming from the CFL or a school up north, and they have to learn the entire game of football again. Taylor Elgersma at the Senior Bowl, I actually talked to him about that very thing. It's very difficult to go from what they do up there to what we do down here. And it's the same thing for FCS guys. A lot of the FCS and the smaller school guys, they don't get the opportunity. They don't have the resources to do a lot of this training. So some of the guys will just skip it. They'll train what they can do, what they think is going to be their strengths. That's what they train for, is their strengths. Guys don't really train their weaknesses as much. You train for the things that you want to show off.
Right.
Whoa, let's stop there. I like what he just said. I think there's a lot of application. Me being an FCS guy, me having to go through all this stuff and, performing really well, but the lack of translation that I never, actually saw an NFL snap. I really like the way you said that, because I do identify that in recanting my own personal journey. But Matt, I cut you off. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was going to say, I wanted to get your take on it, because, one of the famous trainers that we've talked to, Bud Carpenter for the Bills,
Buffalo Bill, shout out Uncle Bud,
34 years with the Bills. He said that the 40 time has basically just become,
it's a bit performative,
like a performative thing and made for TV more than anything else.
There's not a whole lot of football plays that start and end with you running in an unabridged like straight line for 40 yards.
Yeah, and a lot of it is the athletic translation, what those traits mean, because you're not jumping straight up in the NFL either. But we can conceptualize a wide receiver or a cornerback having to go up for a football, even though it's not a straight vertical jump from a standstill. We can understand how that translates. Same thing for like the broad jump, an offensive lineman or defensive lineman. You're going from a stance and you're propelling yourself forward with your lower body. Linemen do that every single play. With the 40-yard dash, it's just going from a stance and accelerating up to speed and maintaining that speed over a distance, which, there's some positions where you'll never really have to maintain it over a distance.
Yeah, I mean, so this is kind of like a shout out that. When did your nerdism get tethered to football? Because some people, and these are really old heads, that are just like, I need the eye test. It's just the eye test for me. Well, you're dumb. Because there are mathematical and analytical applications to how you watch football. The game's dynamic, not static. So when did the nerdism and football get tethered together? And how happy are you that the Lions could possibly be using RAS soon?
They figured it out finally.
Yeah.
So for me, it kind of started the same time that RAS really did. I've always loved football, and I've always loved data and math and coding and all that stuff. But back in 2013, when I decided to do this, when I actually started promoting RAS and doing RAS, it was the Le'Veon Bell draft. And I had thought about this for a few years beforehand. This was just kind of the catalyst, because he ran a 4.6 in the combine. And the whole argument was he's unathletic because of this. But he wasn't. He had a really good cone time, especially for his size. And he was a very athletic player. He just wasn't fast. He also wasn't slow, but he wasn't fast. And that term where it was just unathletic, I started to notice all those superlatives that we use every single year. We talk about how explosive a guy is, quick but not fast. They don't mean anything without context.
Yeah,
and that
sometimes it turns into lost jargon, and they're just semantics.
Well,
That's
and
just
you
words.
can't really measure his methodical running style either that he had, because he literally, like, that's, yes, you might be a little bit slower, you might be a little bit unathletic, but with him, the way that he ran almost straight up, and he waited for his blocks in front of him to get in front of him, and then he was able to take off. I mean, that Le'Veon Bell was a great running back, I think.
In bringing up some of these other players, can you recant on any other players? And I'm not saying you've done this. I'm just, as the model grows and you make tweaks, have any players really make you question how you weight some of these broad-based metrics for these drills and for these measurements that they're doing? Like, are there any players that you're like, I might want to weight this, or maybe this is indicative of a little bit more of a fallacy, or there's a little bit more delta in this, or any of that?
So no, but only because of what I use RAS for. I mean, there are people, and I use it when I'm doing the data analysis and stuff to try to project and look at the numbers and stuff. But the intention, going back to the beginning, was just to make things easier to understand. And I think once you start adding any layer of complexity, you have to explain that layer of complexity. There has to be an explanation behind it. And you want to be able to have something.
That already sounds exhausting.
Yeah, right.
You put so much into, hey, this is what it is, and it's like, well, it's just like, shut up.
Yep. And I think I still run into that with how the size grades are done, because everything else is by the best, right? The best 40-yard dash, the best cone, because it just works that way with the metric. The size drills can never be measured to an ideal for any position, because there is no ideal for any position. If you're a running back and you're 6 foot and 230 pounds, that's great for a power back. Maybe you don't want your speed back being that big in general. It'd be great if you had a guy that was super fast and that large. Same thing if you have a power back. A power back being 5'10", 200, that would be pretty bad. But for a scat back or a guy that you want to use as a speedy guy to the backfield, that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's like the argument of two guys who are probably going to wear gold jackets: Derrick Henry and Barry Sanders. Two body types that couldn't be less similar.
Yeah. And when you start looking at that, the size grades.
I try to go with a lion for you, by the way.
Yeah, the size grades are just going to weight everything else for size. But we're still displaying it on the card. So I end up explaining that quite a lot because it's still on the card. We still have to explain why that is. I also run into that with offensive linemen, because people forget every year just how gigantic offensive linemen are, offensive tackles especially.
Oh, believe me, we just had Alec Anderson on, and we treated him to dinner before the podcast. So my wallet knows how massive they are.
But every year, guys like 6'5", and so I was having this conversation, I think today or yesterday, but a guy's like 6'5", and like, why is that average? Why is that below average? That's perfectly fine. And it's like, yeah, that is still below average for a tackle. These guys are huge.
I feel like that's a conversation with every girlfriend I've had. It's average.
But real quick, moving away from that part of this a little bit, but how do you kind of like weight it against like height and weight? Like, and I get like receiver, but you have like a receiver like a DK Metcalf who ran a 4.35. But then you have a receiver
like a Julian Edelman,
well,
or
not even that, like an
Shakir,
Xavier Worthy last year who broke the record at 4.21. Like that speed is not that much different.
Tyreek Hill,
but you have they have like 6 inches between them. Like how do you kind of weight that differently between those two players?
And that's exactly what the size scores are there for, because you're going to have DK Metcalf, who's above average size. I think he was in the green for size, actually, for both size metrics. But he has very, very good metrics for size by comparing to wide receivers. Xavier Worthy doesn't. They're much smaller. So he's going to have a much higher score added into that final average. The final score is not an average, but there is a final average that's used. So I don't want to get that confused. But those size grades get added in. So for Xavier Worthy, that would be a ding against all of his other scores. Now, he still tested well enough, obviously, in the other scores to bring that up. But DK Metcalf also tested very, very well in that area. So Xavier Worthy could end up, getting in the 8s or 9s, even in the high 9s. But DK Metcalf being as big as he is with those kind of speed scores, just looking at the same metrics, he's always going to have a higher RAS because those size scores get graded into it.
Kat, let me ask you this: as we go into this and everything, maybe this is a moment to give it a shout out. Who are some of the early adopters of RAS that continue, or one of those first moments who kind of almost validated hey man, maybe I'm onto something here. Like, did you ever have one of those moments where it was just like, oh, that was cool. Like he saw what I was doing and he piped into the conversation of me trying to make football more palatable.
Yeah, and I feel like new ones every single year. You know, I got to meet Lance Earline last year. And he actually recognized me before I recognized him, which isn't because I'm like more important or anything. It's just I have a more distinctive look.
It's the mustache.
Yeah, and I'm usually wearing a bowler too.
The bowling hat. I saw that.
Yeah. So, you know, it's just for that. But getting to meet him, you know, one of my heroes, I've been following Lance for years. I've read every single one of his reports for I can't even remember how when. You know, that was one of the biggest moments for me. I also got to meet Coach Gorzik, the one that actually does the timing at the combine when I went down to the Senior Bowl a couple years ago. Just happened to run into him. You know, chatted about what I do and everything. But this is the guy that I watch every single year at the combine who blows the whistle and tells them to stop and says, you're fast, you're gonna do it. You know, he hypes everybody up. Getting to meet him was really cool. You know, I've had teams, like I said, that I've talked to and getting on all that stuff. It's
awesome,
really fun to see it new. But the Miami Dolphins, I was on their official podcast early. I've been on the New York Giants official
Shout out Brian Dable
a couple of times. You know, those are always really, really fun moments for me.
Yeah, I mean, so you spoke a little bit about Lance Zierlein being a little, you know, inspirational, kind of like it. You know, was there anybody else you took inspiration from to kind of move into this sector of like sports analytics and sports? Like,
and why wasn't it Darren Rovell?
and also like, did Bill James kind of, you know, help you? You know. The way that he looks at things, did you ever, you know, use him as inspiration at all?
No, because I didn't come in through the sports pipeline. I didn't go from sports to analytics. I kind of came the other way around. I worked in cryptology in the Navy. I did a lot of pattern recognition and a lot of coding. And from there, I got into that concept of pattern recognition and started to look for things that line up. And I'm just one of those, you know, everybody has those traits that they have that they're good at. I'm pretty good at pattern recognition. So I got into it kind of the other way, from the other side, from the coding and development perspective, and just hey, this is a thing I think is annoying. I'm going to code out a way to fix this or to display this in a way that makes more sense. And then I started getting into sabermetrics and all that other fun jazz, and started learning about it from that side. So I'd already started building everything out. I know one of the biggest individual items that I came upon. I wish I could remember who brought it up. But ensuring that you account for the edges was one of the big quotes that I took away from an analytics perspective, because Byron Jones came along with his 12-foot 3-inch broad jump and, you know, set the world record for the broad. And I had to recode everything because I didn't bother to think, oh, nobody's ever going to break a world record or anything. It's always going to kind of be pretty close. So I don't really have to worry about, you know, how my calculation is working. But once I heard that, you know, make sure you account for the edges, you know, I started doing that a lot better, making sure that I can account for when somebody blows you out of the water. And I'm glad I did, because that happens seemingly every year now.
Yeah, I mean, when I look at things like, you know, that sounds like, I'm trying to remember which basketball metric it is that changed with Russell Westbrook having one of the best. I think it was box
explosivity or
something like that.
Yeah,
I can't remember which one it is, but he had the best one of all time, and he's like, wait, these metrics are messed up. I gotta fix the formula. So it's kind of what you're talking about a little bit with that with Byron Jones. But man,
and as you mentioned your role in the Navy and stuff like that. Looking forward in the rise of AI, stuff like that, where do you see applications towards AI? Would you consider this kind of almost like an open queue to integrate some of that stuff in RAS, or where do you fall kind of like in the whole prism of AI?
So for the most part, it's not far enough along from a data management perspective for me to feel comfortable with it. And you can see this just by the questions that I occasionally get asked, where people will tag Grok and ask it a question. It hasn't been right once. And that's not, it's a piece of garbage.
Gronk or Grok?
But you know, it's
Same
not
thing.
like it's this thing it'll never be good. It's always going to be wrong. But it's wrong about everything right now because of how those things work. They're learning models. They have to get the information from somewhere, and that information has to be correct in the source they're looking for, and it has to know what that source. They have to know what it's looking for too. So when people are asking about my metric specifically, it only exists in one place, which is on my website and in my data and the people who have written about it, which all link back to each other. So any learning model is always going to kind of go in a circle. So if you ask it something that isn't already written about, it's not going to be able to find it, and it's not going to know how to make that up, because that's not what those models do. They don't make things up. Well, they do make things up. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to give you accurate information, not just come up with, this sounds close. We're just going to say that it is.
Feeling-based, feel-good stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't think Grok is enough open source, because it seems like if you're combing through just the absolute cesspool of some of my tweets, you're not going to learn much. Besides, this guy's an insufferable asshole.
Yeah. So I want to give an example of a good use of AI, though. One of the best uses of AI that I've ever seen is I'm a big film buff. I love old films. I love old horror movies. And they were showing one of the applications that they use AI for is cleaning up the old audio from the 1930s, 1940s. All that old black and white
use it
film.
even now, yeah.
And one of the examples that I saw was Bela Lugosi in Dracula. And the way that they used AI to clean out all the static and get down to the actual voice and the way that the things actually sounded, that is a perfect application of AI, because you're using it for something.
Use it for Bane and Batman then.
Yeah. And we can use James Earl Jones will be the voice of Darth Vader forever, because
that story is wild.
Was stored that way. So for RAS, the application is likely going to be a lot more limited. It's going to be something like how I do data entry and how I'm able to get all the information that I am. The NFL is still very paper and pencil. They send out this massive report. I think the last one was 1,100 something pages for the testing data for pro days. Having something that can just scrape that in a meaningful, accurate way is a good use of AI. You're using something to go through and do that kind of tool. But old school algorithms can do that kind of stuff too. You don't necessarily need AI for it. That might be too much tool for a lot of stuff that I do.
Yeah. I mean, and let's be serious. The NFL is still using yardsticks and a Home Depot chain.
Dude, that kills
I mean, until this year when they're actually gonna be using the whatever to.
That absolutely kills me.
It's absolutely ridiculous. But that kind of goes along with what you just said, what kind of goes along with my next question. I mean, anything that you glean coming in the near future with AI that may help you specifically and also help the NFL?
And with AI, what do you think is closest to being applicable to RAS? You said there's various elements that are not there yet. Is there anything that you would believe is, a year away, 2 years away?
I think a lot of the GPS data that we're getting is pretty close to being useful. It's useful now, but from a practical application for anyone to be able to use and understand, it's nowhere near. People bring up the GPS a lot, but there's a lot of context that is missing when somebody tells you, this guy ran 20.87 miles an hour. He's clearly faster than the 5.3 that he ran. But mathematically, you can run a poor 40 time and still have a high MPH, because it's just a calculation you can do between your 20 and your final 20 yards. You can still hit that. But if you're, extremely slow in that first 10, that's still problematic, right?
Sure.
Right. I mean,
because if you're slow in the first 10, it's going to be very hard to get to the last 20.
I mean, when you look at it, it's just like a car running a quarter mile. Like you might hit 130 at the end of that quarter mile, but what were you doing in the first 10?
Yep, and that's where we get with a lot of receivers. Was this on a go route where he's just running straight? Maybe he had a guy was blitzing on the outside, so he had nobody touch him, just straight off the line. He was able to run straight, and he got up to a really good speed. Or was this a slot receiver who made a cut and got to that speed in 1 second? He was able to get up to that top speed. That's way more meaningful. But we don't have that data broken down in a way that fans can just grab at a glance and be able to compare in a meaningful way. They're just numbers that people can throw out. And it's not that they're meaningless. They just lack context to make them more meaningful. And I think that's where you're going to see AI actually applied, not just for RAS, but for the testing data in general. Because eventually we can go away from doing the traditional 40-yard dash and vert broad and all that stuff. We can find drills that are better reflective of the athletic traits that they're trying to find. We can use pressure plates and that kind of thing to do force metrics and things like that. We're just not there yet. But I feel like we have the technology to be able to be there.
Well, and kind of going back to Raz for a second here, because you did bring up slot receiver and it kind of, tickled something in my brain is like when you're actually breaking down some of these guys, yeah, you have guys that are, higher Raz, but like, and we'll get to him here in a minute, but like somebody like a Jaden Higgins isn't going to be a slot receiver. He's most likely going to be, your X or your Y receiver on the outside. So how do you, is there anything within Raz that can determine, the difference between the two? Because I know you can go through it and like build these other cards on your website directly, where like if you want to put a defensive end, a defensive tackle, a defensive tackle, a defensive end, or anything like, or a guard at tackle or anything like that. Is there any, plans in the future to kind of add maybe like a slot receiver or anything like that?
Yeah, we've already started. We were able to
Good
get
question.
this. I've been sorry, you had more?
No, I said that was a great question. It was one of the ones I had. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we've been building it out. I have some guys that have been helping me out. It requires a lot of manual review because it's 40 years of data. And it really is as simple as we have to go back and find out who all the slot receivers were, that's all that it is. We've been able to build out, I think 3 tech is up right now and nose tackle is up. Both are kind of works in progress. But we've just been going through a database of all the players that I have, and we've been assigning them additional positions that we've decided that we made. So it's not arbitrary. We're not just saying everybody over 320 pounds is now a nose tackle, because the size is part of the grade. That immediately pollutes your data by doing something like that. You can't
I don't know
just
why
say
Rex Bryan just came to my head.
So I've been doing that. It's going to take a while just because it's a fully manual process and I just need help. But I've got people that are helping me and they've been doing a really great job. I can't wait to see. I haven't checked on it in a couple of days. I really need to go look, but it's coming along. We'll eventually get to the point where we'll have a viable, reasonable database of who are the slot receivers from an athletic standpoint. Who were the guys that were considered, outside linebackers versus inside linebackers and things like that. We'll have all those breakdowns eventually. It's just a time-consuming process.
Well, yeah, I mean, because it's something that, would definitely, help I don't want to say the average fan, but the average fan look at, okay, so this guy's, is slotted as a, no pun intended, slotted as a slot receiver in the NFL.
That was bad.
And this guy's, this guy's a bigger guy where, somebody like a Dalton Kincaid from a tight end, he plays that big slot role for the Bills. But is he better as a tight end or is he better as that big slot? So there's a lot of different things that you can do with that. And I'm excited to see that.
And Ken, I got a question for you. And this is probably something you'll be annoyed to answer. What are the top 3 ways the average fan misappropriates Raz? How do they get it wrong? And you're just like, no. I'm going to say one of them is it's not an average.
It's not an average. Yeah, it's not an average.
Did I nail it?
It's one of the big ones that comes up is why. How does he have a score of 9 when none of his individual grades are a 9? Is when it usually comes up. Is when they have all the other scores are lower. Raz does use an average. It uses an average. It then compares that average to the average of every other player, and that's how it gets that final grade. So that's always the big one.
There's one.
It's not really a misinterpretation of the data. It's just a trope that I wait for every year because it's hilarious. But the you can't measure heart, guys. Every year, you can't measure heart. You can't measure grit. And it's like, yeah, I know. Nobody can. It's this made up thing that we have that doesn't really have any
Did you
real
just
statistical
explain to me
value.
the concept of tangibility? You got it, dude. Got it, dude. Thanks. Appreciate you stopping by. Make sure you grab a free water on the way out.
Yeah, and then I already kind of mentioned the other one, which is the most common one, really, which is just people who like they see one thing and that's their anecdote. They're I don't believe in anything about this because I have this one guy that proves everything in my head. It's usually players that are below average that did well. Bucky Irving's the big one right now. I have those Bucs fans up every day. It seems like Kyron Williams before him was another one, but also the big time misses, the guys that have really high scores that then fail. They love to bring that stuff up, and it's like,
I would love to see Jamarcus Russell's RAS score.
He didn't test, but I would love to have seen it too.
No,
I feel like it would have been
that's
good.
what I mean. He didn't test. I would love to have seen it.
It would have been a lot of fun, I think, because I'm sure it would have been.
Measure brain.
I mean, that guy's diet, you probably should measure his heart.
That's the other thing though too. Kent, I really want to thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
We're
this
gonna
has
go
been great.
we're gonna go through some players here real quickly, but before we do get to that, we do have a segment that we started a couple weeks ago. It's called This or That. It's just real quick segment. You tell me which one you're more of a fan of. Yeah, I didn't put it in the call sheet. I have it in my brain because
Oh, nice. I just won't participate. Nice. Anyway, I'm gonna go take a piss.
real quick. Moneyball or Draft Day, which is your favorite?
Probably Draft Day. I like both films. Like I said before, I'm a movies guy. I'm more a classical movies guy than sports movies, but I like Draft Day.
The other one that we have is
I should have made a Streetcar Named Desire joke when you were talking about you can't measure heart.
The other one is spaces or tabs.
It depends on the situation. Again, I'm a maths. I both code and I do stuff in spreadsheets a lot, so it depends on what application.
You seem like a Python guy.
I do JavaScript right now mostly.
Language.
Yeah. Anything that can make stuff do the stuff I need it to do. I just need it to work fast and efficiently.
Sounds like there's going to be a tariff involved in that.
And then we actually have one from the comments here. Football instincts or terrible hands?
Ooh. You want those instincts more than terrible hands.
Yeah, those things seem diametrically opposed.
A little bit. But all right, let's get to some of these players, and I'm going to ask you first. Who are, and I have the cards that you sent me. So, who are the players that you specifically feel are the best fits for the Bills in their first three picks?
Wow, you're tightening the screws on this guy.
At 30, 56, and 62.
Yeah, so I was looking through the guys that we already had.
Yeah.
You mentioned that they need a corner. Jody Barron was a guy that I don't think you mentioned him in the list of guys that you had. He might be available at the end of that first round.
Yeah, I think he's going to be gone. Honestly, I think he's going to be gone by 30. If they do trade up into the late teens, early 20s, he may still be there, but I think he's going to be gone.
Yeah, probably. But if he is there, that's like one of those run it to the podium types of choices, right?
Right.
It happens occasionally to the Ravens. It's got to happen to somebody else eventually, right? Where one of the best players falls. If we're not going corner, Jahad Campbell's a guy that seems to be all over the place at the end of that first round. And that would be a great pickup, I think, to help build that defense. He's a very athletic, very fast player on the field, very explosive. That showed up in the little bit of testing that he did. And then later on, I'm a huge Maxwell Hairston fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll use any opportunity to bring him up. And you actually brought him up, so I get to cheat and just use copy off of your
Yeah. I mean, he's one of my favorite. My favorite corner in the entire draft, honestly, is Trey Amos. Just because of his length that he has, the way that he plays. We just said you can't measure brain or heart, but you can clearly see that in on the field that he is one of the smarter guys. Like he'll peel off somebody and have already seen the play 100 times and go take an interception. So, but with somebody like Maxwell Harrison, he tests real well. He's, very, what is that? Almost 9 hand size, 31 arm length is pretty lengthy for a corner himself. Also Ryan Talbot, one of the big Bills guys, is actually on that. Shout out to Ryan.
Yeah.
He was telling this a couple weeks ago when we had him on, that, he's probably his favorite corner in the draft, as well.
Yeah, and I hope he goes higher than a lot of people project him to, but he's one of my favorite players. I love guys that that play a lot bigger than they are. This is a guy that people will try to bully, and he'll usually make them pay for it. He might get knocked around on a few plays because he's not a very big guy. He's not short. He's just a little slender. Doesn't have a whole lot of weight behind him, but he plays with a lot of aggression, and that explosiveness more than the speed shows up because he's able to cover that short range very, very fast. And it's really fun to watch bigger guys that try to push him around who think they have a nice cushion and just watch that cushion evaporate. And I love when guys can do that. It's one of my favorite things.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about the super soldier, Nick Emanwari.
Ooh, I like this cat.
Yeah, so this is a guy, usually when you have a guy that scores this well, they're like a second or third round projected guy because of their athleticism. Nick Emanwari's safety 2 or safety 1 for most people.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a player that people expected to be, one of their top prospects, and then he scored this well. He had the highest score for strong safety, free safety, and corner. So he would have tested out the best at any of those three positions.
I mean, 6'3's got to be like over the 95th percentile, something like that. That's a big boy, 220, especially at 4.38 and moving at 6'3. 6'3. That's exciting.
Yeah,
that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I have Eamon Worry going 24th to the Vikings in my mock draft that I did. I'll have one more that goes out the day before the day before the draft itself. But I think that he's probably the best safety in the draft itself. And the nice thing is you can play him at safety. You can play him at big nickel, drop him down a little bit. You can play him at corner if need be.
You know what else is kind of cool about that cat too, is that in the age of NIL, he stayed at South Carolina all his years. Moving off of like that, I just think that's something cool about that because it so
almost
unique.
Speaks to his loyalty, right?
Kind of what I'm glad you're bagging what I'm raking. That's kind of like what I'm saying there. But yeah, perfect 10 on the RAS, I believe, right?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
And then the other one that had a perfect RAS, because you had what, 2 this year?
Yes, 2
is Eamon Worry and Shamar Stewart. So tell me a little bit about Stewart. He actually is one of my favorite players in the entire draft.
Yeah, and he's one of those metrics over traditional statistics kind of guys because he only had 4.5 sacks in college. He doesn't have all that college level production in terms of traditional production that people like to see. That's going to turn a lot of heads the other way. We had Daniil Hunter with the exact same situation where Daniil Hunter came out. He ended up going in the 3rd round, landed in the perfect spot, and got coached up by the perfect person to coach him. But he had all those athletic traits, and that's where Shamar Stewart comes in. The really big question people have to answer is, how do we value that, knowing that it is possible and knowing how that kind of thing can work? How do we value that? Because the only example that we have was in the 3rd round. So we've got a couple of first-round guys that were still metrics over production. Ziggy Ansah is a good example of that. It comes up from time to time. But for me, it's how much do you value that versus what you think you can turn him into. And if you think he can turn all of the pressures that he's been able to get and he can turn those into actual sacks in the NFL, you're going to value him a lot higher.
Versus development. Best.
You're always drafting a guy for what they can be, not what they were in college. You're drafting for what you want.
Of course, like we say it a lot on this podcast. When you get it, especially an FCS guy who doesn't really have like the Power 5 nutrition program, doesn't have the Power 5 weight program, they get into a regimented NFL system for one off season. Look at the uptick in projection of AJ Epinesa. Spencer Brown, who scored incredibly high. Christian Benford, yeah. So we do have a question from Whittle. He says, shirts or blouse? I'm interested if you get this reference, shirts or blouses?
Blouses, of course.
Game blouses. Do you know what he's talking about?
I don't.
Yes.
The Dave Chappelle
skits, man. Big fan of sketch comedy.
Oh, I'm so happy you got the game blouses.
Yes. Okay. I think I've seen it.
I'm so happy you got that.
You've shown it to me. But getting back to this, one of my favorite players in the maybe later rounds, maybe like late 2nd, early 3rd, maybe falls down to the 4th is actually Andrew Makuba. I don't know. I mean, I wish he would have tested better. His speed is really good. His splits are really good, but he doesn't have the size and he doesn't have, the weight behind him. So it kind of like disappointed that he's only got a lower athletic score, but he's still above that 5 that you talked about.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how he does.
We should call. Can we call that the Ingram threshold?
So I'm really interested in how he does for very specific because his card is almost exactly the opposite of a specific type of safety that I've seen have a lot of success in the NFL, which is a guy that doesn't have a great 40, but does have a great 10-yard split. And then either has great agility drills or great explosive drills or both. It doesn't have to be, but some combination out of 2 of those 3 things. But he's got the opposite. He's got the poor agility drills and then a poor 10 and then just the really good 40. I don't think that this makes him a bad prospect. I don't think this eliminates him from anything. Speed is important at safety. Being able to cover a lot of ground is very important.
Phil, how quick can you fill the alley? Yeah.
Yeah. So that's perfectly fine. It's just a weird profile. So it's hard from a statistics standpoint to say much about it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at is I wish he would have tested better because you watch his film or anything like that. He seems to always be in the right spot. He does make some mistakes, does need to, I don't want to say play catch up a little bit, but I mean, he just seems to always be where he needs to be. So I'm interested to see how well he does in the NFL in itself. The other one I have here for you is Caldwell. Again, not tested very well. But he is a bigger guy. You don't expect him to have, a 4'8" or 4'9" at 332 pounds. And then one of the other things that kills him too is that only being 6'2".
Yeah, and you don't usually see a lot of guys that big because you're expecting him to be a nose tackle at 330 in general. Those guys are generally bigger. And it's not just his height, it's his wingspan, it's his arm length. You want those to be really big because nose tackles are not generally very athletic guys. We didn't get a broad jump for him, which is one of the more important ones for a nose tackle. Nose tackles basically just have to have size, weight specifically for size. They generally have a really good bench, and then they generally have a really good broad, and they will sometimes have a really good 10-yard split. That's only 4 out of 10 metrics.
Right, you need 6.
Yep, and the other metrics they're usually terrible at. Right. So they have to be good, not great, just good in those things, and then they're usually terrible in the others. They end up with lower scores anyway. 3.5 is actually pretty good for a nose tackle.
Interesting.
But we don't have the more important metrics, the individual metrics that we would need for a nose tackle. His 10-yard split wasn't very good, and we don't have that broad, and we don't have a bench. So we didn't end up with some of the metrics that we would have liked to get to be able to project more confidently.
Right.
He's a good nose tackle.
Is there anything that you can do? Like, this is more personal asking. Is there anything you can do for, as like kind of I don't want to call it like a rubric, but I mean, also put it on cause you brought it up that nose tackle testing it like 3-4 is good. It's not necessarily the worst case scenario, but you want like a corner to be testing in the above 8.5 to 10, so I mean, is there anything that you have on your website or, anybody can refer to see where those scores are?
That's kind of one of the things I'm building out. So I mentioned that we're building out the database right now. We have the 3 techs and the nose tackles built out, or at least partially built out now. The other thing that I need to be able to do is to direct people to those options once those options are available. So if you have a guy that's over, I'll say 310, because it's going to be a lower mark for it. But if they're over that, but they have a couple of those other good things, I'll be able to have something that pops up and says, hey, you might want to try this at nose tackle. He has those metrics that might work better there. Same thing for defensive ends. A defensive end is over 280. Maybe he would look better as a 3 tech. Maybe he would look better as a 34 DL, which is one of the other positions we're building out. Once I have those positions built out, I can start to build something out that says if they meet these criteria, maybe direct the user to go try these other things out, or just display what those scores might be. Because if I can calculate one, I can calculate the other ones.
Well, and that's kind of what I was getting at is you just brought that up just randomly on here saying, a nose tackle might be really good at a 3 or a 4, but, so like if you could literally go on the website and have it, where it's like nose tackle grade, is good at certain levels where even if you maybe just like change the color or something like that, not telling you what to do or anything like that, but just for the average fan. And that's kind of so that an average fan could literally just go to the website and be like, oh, he's a nose tackle. He's scoring in green, but he is at that 3 level, kind of understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it's the same thing for offensive linemen, especially tackles. Everybody always wants to know, what does he look like as a guard? What does he look like as a center? That's something that we can just display on the site and just show it that way. We have a lot of real estate issues. My site's not designed to be super optimized. It's meant to be functional, not optimized. I am looking into getting that better. I got enough.
I think you just explained the DMV.
Yeah, I got enough in donations this year to be able to try to reach out to some developers to do some upgrades to the site. So that's one of the things I'm looking into doing is finding better ways to use some of the real estate that we have. And design the cards in a way that they're a bit more interactive so that people can do things right there on the cards. We don't have like options beneath the card. We have to scroll down and stuff. We're looking into doing some of that stuff so that we can make it more dynamic, but I'm a team of 1 and I usually bring in an intern. I wasn't able to do that this year. So this year was a little bit more scrambled than usually, which it had to be for as big as it was. Of course, it was going to also be a rush.
Yeah, so I mean, we have one a question from the comments here. Bills fan, is there any insight that you have on new Bills safety, Derek Forrest?
Not really. From a RAS perspective, or like
Correct.
from a
Correct.
Yeah. Let me go look because my thing just closed on me. Of course, always happens when you're asked a question, your stuff closes.
While you're doing that, I'm gonna just do what you just talked about and pay some bills for us.
For the best Italian food in Western New York, Elliot Apollo's, call 716-825-3675. The Lardon Construction Group.
Fubo TV, the official streaming service of Do Champions. FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Do Champions.
For all your summertime needs, beauty pools, as well as kayak pools.
CX Chronicles, your total customer solutions focused manager. W.GG, the official energy drink of Do Champions.
Hey, Sons of Erie, our artwork looks better on your walls. Hamburg Brewing, please visit our tap room on Boston State Road, Hamburg, New York. And finally,
Fat Boy Surf Club for all your surfing needs. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors there. Thank you to Kent Lee Platte as he's hopped on with us here tonight.
Yeah, that does sound way more fresh. Kent Lee Platte. That man.
I tried. It didn't work.
Well, we got it now, so you're good. We definitely love to have you on the show again. This has been a lot of fun.
So, real quick, walk us through the comparison between the Bills and the Lions, man. We're brethren, almost in the Rust Belt. And are you looking forward to the tides turning where people start you're no longer the darling? Because the Bills were the darling from what? 2017 to 2021.
Yeah.
And then when Josh really started to hit his stride, people came out of the woodwork to be like, no MVPs, never beat Mahomes and stuff like that. And it's almost like the team collectively became, kind of an annoyance, right? Do you think, where do you think you're at on that roller coaster ride when it comes to the Lions as a fan right now? And are you looking forward to the drop off? Because it's great.
So if you have one good season, it's a fluke. Anybody that hates your team, hates this individual player, hates this college that they came from. If you have a good season, it's a fluke. That's all it is. There's no data. We don't need to talk about why. He just is. It's a fluke. There's no reason that it happened. It's never going to happen again. It happened one time. Once something starts to happen back to back and then starts to happen again and again, you start to build on it. Now you got a trend. So Josh Allen coming into the NFL was bad. He was a very, very risky player. He had a lot of bad tape in college. He had a lot of good tape in college. Not
to make the pun, a little bit too much cowboy ball coming from the young man out of the University of Wyoming.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that, he's bad. And then he's not, they're finding ways to make it work. He's getting better. And then Josh Allen, now he's just good. It's boring. Nobody wants to talk about the good players. You want to talk about those guys that are up and coming.
Well, I think the lure really of the Lions started with that Hard Knocks. Dan Campbell reads off his coffee order, which is like an Excel. I'm not a coffee guy. I don't need any. Like an Excel with 4 shots of espresso, and it's like we're off.
Yep.
Where we like the Lions now.
He's a trip, man. He'll say all this smart stuff and then one stupid thing.
Well, you got to remember he's a meathead tight end at heart,
Yeah, but that's the thing they'll latch on to. It's like the kneecaps thing when he first came out. He had this big presser where he talked about the direction he wanted to take the franchise, his thoughts on how he liked to develop people, and how he looked at a team's development over time and what he valued as success. But also, we want to bite people in the kneecaps, and all that other stuff didn't matter anymore. It's the only thing the media.
Yeah, that's like an old school Vietnam, like trench warfare reference. It's like, guy, come on, man. We just play on Sundays, and Chick-fil-A is not even open for half the stadiums they're included in.
Yeah. So to get back to your original question, what are they like? It's like that. We're getting to the point where the people just kind of accept that the Lions are expected to be good now. They're no longer the laughing stock of the NFL. They're not this bootlick team that's going to suck every year. They're in a very risky time. They lost their offensive coordinator who rejuvenated Jared Goff's career. He built
Johnson, yeah.
Then he rebuilt the offensive line and the running game in a point where the other NFL teams are copying what the Lions have done over the last couple of years. He brought this schematic identity.
It's a copycat league, imitation, man.
Yep. They now he's gone. So how much of that is going to be retained with the new offensive coordinator? The same thing's true with Aaron Glenn's defense. Aaron Glenn's defense schematically didn't really matter. Most people couldn't even tell you what was good about it from a schematic standpoint. But what he was able to do was adapt to losing players and being able to change his scheme on the fly and be able to change where his personnel are aligned, how he's going to use his defensive line, how he uses his cornerbacks, where his linebackers are going to be against this specific opponent. That's gone now. But they've been grooming a successor. So we're to that point with the Lions where they've been talking about development since they got here. This is the put up or shut up moment, because you can't say we're developing. You've got guys that have to be developed from a player standpoint, and you've got coaches that need to be developed from a coaching standpoint. So it's going to be a very interesting year for how they actually play. But if they don't take a huge drop off a cliff, I think we have to just kind of accept that they're a good team now.
Comment from us, from Whittle. The Lions have one more season before people start hating on them. I think that's kind of, what do you think? You said, I think that goes along with put up or shut up. Now for Lions draft day, Kent, this is just, this is for the fan, Kent. Where are you at with who do you want, and how much do you actually apply our own system versus just who your heart says? Or is that thing so blackened with binary code that you actually don't have any emotions? You just go by the data.
Yeah, I go by the data quite a bit, but I do like players. I still watch guys and I like them. Derek Harmon is probably the best. And I actually think I posted that, it might have been earlier today or yesterday, but the defensive tackle out of Oregon is the best, one of the best scheme and like team and coaching and just player, everything lines up so perfectly. If he were to land in Detroit, there's not a lot of those like really perfect fits and perfect pairings, but this is one of them. I think if he were to come into Detroit, he's got all pro potential. But there's a lot of guys I'd be perfectly fine with. We talked about small school guys. Gray Zabel's one of the biggest talked about linemen right now, would be perfectly fine with that decision. The ones that I probably wouldn't like, I don't generally like.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah. Like, what's like what you want to shy away from? Just for you.
Yeah. So every fan base has this, right? You've been shell shocked by a thing, right? Every fan base has it. It could be anything. For the Lions, for me, it's been unathletic offensive linemen where athleticism is a question. Because
ours would be the Kansas City refs.
Yeah. So we had a back-to-back general manager. We had Matt Millen, who was one of the worst general managers in NFL history, maybe even sports history for some people. And then Martin Mayhew, who came after him, who was like his chosen successor, essentially. And they both just loved these big, mountainous offensive linemen who could barely move. So unathletic offensive linemen who don't test very well, I tend to shy away from, just because I've seen that fail so spectacularly so many times. I can look at a guy like Tyler Booker and think that's a really good player. He'll probably still go in the first round. I'm rooting for him to succeed as a player. I still don't want to draft him because I've seen that fail in my colors so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. So we're gonna wrap up here in a.
That was, speaking of athleticism, that was awful.
That was horrible. I lost my headset there for a second, but we're gonna wrap this up here in a second. So we definitely we definitely appreciate you hopping on and everything. But I do want to ask you real quickly, out of everybody
we're not wrapping it up.
Out of everybody that's tested, who is your favorite player when it comes to RAS? Of all time.
All time.
Oh, of all time?
All time.
Oh, yeah. God, I have so many. There's so many fun ones.
No, okay, we'll go with this. What was your favorite movie of all time?
Favorite movie?
12
Angry Men. The original
12 Angry Men.
Yeah, hands down. Best. It's a cinematic masterpiece from start to finish.
Man.
Easy for me.
I've seen that, yeah. I'm trying to
there was a remake in the 70s with Jack Lemmon. Also,
how do you feel about
very,
Cool
very
Hand
good.
Luke?
Cool Hand Luke was really good.
I don't like the way you said that.
Shades off, boss.
My boy says he can eat 50 eggs. He can eat 50 eggs.
Yeah. So, but no, I mean, give me your top 3 players of all time that you do based on RAS.
Yeah. So Calvin Johnson happened to be a Lion. But
is this because because we have the data to back test it? It backs it up, or okay? There you go.
It's all data. It's all data. We're
back testing it. These are the ones I love because I was fucking right.
So Calvin Johnson, his 10 at wide receiver is probably never going to get beaten. Every couple of years we have a player that gets close, but his worst test, Calvin's worst test, was like 97th percentile. So I don't think that's ever going to get beaten. Somebody would have to test just insanely well and be that big to even have a chance of getting that one. So that's always one of my favorite. On the other end of the spectrum, Jarvis Landry had a 0.27 RAS.
I love that it was 0.27.
I fucking could not be happier hearing that.
It's hilarious.
That guy.
And he that year when he had that score, a friend of mine, a guy I know, did the tests and scored significantly higher. Now, Jarvis Landry was hurt. He had a hamstring
Jarvis
injury.
Landry also hurts people.
So before he tested, he was injured. So we knew that his testing wasn't going to be great. He tested anyway. That's why it's so funny, because it's so bad. It's literally one of the worst ever. But he still ended up having a solid NFL career despite that, and his scoring was just atrocious.
What have you ever gone back and back tested Tony Mandrake?
I think I have Mandarek. I know I have
Mandarek. Is it Mandarek or Mandrake? Mandarek. Ken, I remember going back and tell me you have it. That'd be fantastic.
Yes. It's what you think it's going to be too.
He got the Sports Illustrated cover, and I just remember, bang, possibly the best offensive lineman prospect ever. The incredible bulk. I cannot wait to hear this. Hit me with it, Ken.
He had in 1989 a 10. He had the highest score for offensive tackle.
Oh,
but that was 1 out of 68. I only had 68 guys from 87 to 89.
Got it. Okay.
So,
but it fits the narrative of what was propped up, which made the Colts select him. And was it Colts or the Packers?
Packers, yeah.
He ended up having a fruitful career after he got off the Balco later. But that kind of fits the narrative of what they were all pushing, like the best possible offensive lineman prospect ever.
Yep.
That's you know what, that's so cool that was just a random thought and you did have it dialed up, man. The power of databases and making people better, and that is what Mr. Kent Lee Platte tries to do. Man, we can't thank you enough for coming on. I know this is a big time in your year. This is kind of every day is your Super Bowl and every day is your press conference, kind of explaining your baby, how it developed. And we do want to thank you for taking the time to impart everything that's made you great, and such a joy to be on Twitter. So, hey, how about you take this time, tell us what you got going on, where people can find you, and you going to take any vacation off this draft, or does the train just keep going?
No, my wife's birthday is right after the draft every year, so I always have an excuse immediately following the draft to go take her out and go.
Does your wife get it? By the way, does she get it? This whole thing.
She has Math Bomb. Right? She shows up. Yeah, she'll help me out every
Miss Math Bomb. If you don't have that Twitter handle registered, I'm about to get it right now.
Yeah, she's great. So you can find me on Twitter at Math Bomb. That's where I'm most active during the draft, just because I have the most followers there. I'm also pretty active on Blue Sky. You can find me over there as well.
Awesome.
My website is ras.football, ras.football. Very easy to get to. You can search. I've got almost 30,000 players on there now. There's over 2,500 in this draft class alone that have a score. So this is our biggest draft class of all time. You can go check that out there. I also run the Pro Football Network mock draft simulator. I manage all of their data and push all their rankings and stuff like that. So
wow, that's got to be a big undertaking.
It's a lot of fun, especially on draft night. We actually update after every single pick all the way through, I think, round 6. I think we stop after the 6th round.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Lots and lots of fun. And you can find that at profootballnetwork.com/mockdraft.
That's awesome. Kent, thank you so much for coming.
Yo, man, this is great. I can't imagine this is going to be the last time we see you, man. It was absolutely fantastic. It's great to know the inner workings, and it's great that there's a very infectious personality behind that believes so deeply in broadening and, while at the same time sharpening how the average football fan can be better at watching the game. Ken, thanks so much, man. Really appreciate it, Kent. Thank you, Ken.
Guys.
Thank you so much. We're really appreciate it, Kent. You've been watching the Third Manageable podcast. I am one of your hosts at Matt Diegert, and you have Student Body Right. We want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Everybody, Kent Lee Platte was great.
He was cool as hell.
I mean, I'm glad to see that there was personality there. We've watched him on multiple podcasts, and it's just great. It's great to see
some things,
those-
especially when you introduce data, it can get dried up so easily, and just like the monotonous of just numbers and stuff like that, and everything gets so drowned out. But we do thank everybody for listening tonight, all 600-700 of you. That was absolutely fantastic.
Definitely check everybody out.
Hey Matt,
Hold on.
but
Wednesday, Coast to Coast. Thursday, Chasing Data. Friday Night Lights with Pat Bruckness, Madden Simulation, college football. Hockey Hotline Saturday mornings. Third and Manageable Saturday nights. And the Buffalo Blueprint on Sundays.
hey Matt, good to
Yo,
be seen.
Good to be seen.